Connective tissue. The objective of this section is to describe the general features of connective tissue. Describe the structure, location, and function of the various types of connective tissue. Connective tissue is one of the most abundant and widely distributed tissues in the body. In its various forms, connective tissue has a variety of functions. It binds together, supports, and strengthens other body tissues, protects and insulates internal organs, compartmentalizes structures such as skeletal muscle, serves as the major transport system within the body, blood, a fluid connective tissue, is the primary location of stored energy, adipose or fat tissue, and is the main source of immune responses. General features of connective tissue. Connective tissue consists of two basic elements, extracellular matrix and cells. A connective tissue's extracellular matrix is the material located between its widely spaced cells. The extracellular matrix consists of protein fibers and ground substance, the material between the cells and the fibers. The extracellular matrix is usually secreted by the connective tissue cells and determines the tissue's qualities. For instance, in cartilage, the extracellular matrix is firm but pliable. The extracellular matrix of bone, by contrast, is hard and inflexible. In contrast to epithelia, connective tissues do not usually occur on body surfaces. Also, unlike epithelia, connective tissues usually are highly vascular. That is, they have rich blood supply. Exceptions include cartilage, which is avascular, and tendons, with a scanty blood supply. Except for cartilage, connective tissues like epithelia are supplied with nerves. Connective tissue cells. Mesodermal embryonic cells are called mesenchymal cells. They give rise to cells of connective tissue. Each major type of connective tissue contains an immature cell or cells within a name ending in blast, which means to bud or sprout. The immature cells are called fibroblasts in loose and dense connective tissue, which will be described shortly. Chondroblasts in cartilage, and osteoblasts in bone. Blast cells, B-L-A-S-T, blast cells, retain the capacity for cell division and secrete the extracellular matrix that is characteristic of the tissue. In cartilage and bone, once the extracellular matrix is produced, the immature cells differentiate into mature cells with names ending in "cyte," namely chondrocytes, osteocytes. Mature cells have reduced capacities for cell division and extracellular matrix formation and are mostly involved in maintaining the matrix. The types of connective tissue cells vary according to the type of tissue and include the following. Fibroblasts. Fibro meaning fiber. Fibroblasts are large, flat cells with branching processes. They are present in several connective tissues and usually are the most numerous. Fibroblasts migrate through the connective tissue, secreting the fibers and certain components of the ground substances of the extracellular matrix. Once again, fibroblasts migrate through connective tissue, secreting the fibers and certain components of the ground substance of the extracellular matrix. Adipocytes. Adipocytes are called fat cells or adipose cells. Are connective tissue cells that store triglycerides, fats. They are found deep in the skin and around organs such as the heart and the kidneys. Mast cells are abundant alongside the blood vessels that supply connective tissue. They produce histamine, a chemical that dilates small blood vessels as part of the inflammatory process, the body's reaction to injury or infection. In addition, researchers have recently discovered that mast cells can bind to, ingest, and kill bacteria. White blood cells are not found in significant numbers in normal connective tissue. However, in response to certain conditions they migrate from blood into connective tissues. For example, neutrophils gather at sites of infection, and eosinophils migrate to sites of parasitic invasion and allergic response. Macrophages. Macrophages develop from monocytes, a type of white blood cell. Macrophages have an irregular shape with short branching projections and are capable of engulfing bacteria and cellular debris. By phagocytosis, fixed macrophages reside in a particular tissue. Examples include alveolar macrophages in the lungs or splenic macrophages in the spleen. Wandering macrophages have the ability to move throughout the tissue and gather at sites of infection or inflammation to carry out phagocytosis. Plasma cells. Plasma cells are small cells that develop from a type of white blood cell called B lymphocytes. Plasma cells secrete antibodies, proteins that attack or neutralize foreign substances in the body. Thus, plasma cells are an important part of the body's immune response. Although they are found in many places in the body, most plasma cells reside in the connective tissues, especially in the gastrointestinal and respiratory tracts. They are also abundant in salivary glands, lymph nodes, spleen, and red bone marrow. Connective tissue extracellular matrix. Each type of connective tissue has unique properties based on the specific extracellular materials between the cells. The extracellular matrix consists of two major components: ground substance and fibers. Ground substance, as noted earlier. The ground substance is the component of a connective tissue between the cells and fibers. Okay, I'm going to repeat this section. Ground substance. As noted earlier, the ground substance is the component of a connective tissue between cells and fibers. The ground substance may be fluid, semi-fluid, gelatinous, or calcified. The ground substance supports cells, binds them together, stores water, and provides a medium through which substances are exchanged between blood and cells. It plays an active role in how tissues develop, migrate, proliferate, and change shape, and how they carry out their metabolic functions. Ground substance contains water and an assortment of large organic molecules, many of which are a complex combination of polysaccharides and proteins. The polysaccharides include hyaluronic acid, chondroitin sulfate, dermatan sulfate, and keratin sulfate. Collectively, they are referred to as glycosaminoglycans. Let me rephrase that. Glucosaminoglycans, or GAGs. One of the most important properties of GAGs is that they trap water, making the ground substance more jelly-like. Hyaluronic acid is a viscous, slippery substance that binds cells together, lubricates joints, and helps maintain the shape of the eyeballs. White blood cells, sperm cells, and some bacteria produce hyaluronidase, an enzyme that breaks apart hyaluronic acid, thus causing the ground substance of connective tissue to become more liquid. The ability to produce hyaluronidase helps white blood cells move more easily through connective tissue to reach the site of infection and aids penetration of an oocyte by a sperm cell during fertilization. It also accounts for the rapid spread of bacteria through connective tissue. Chondroitin sulfate provides support and adhesiveness in cartilage, bone, skin, and blood vessels. The skin, tendons, blood vessels, and heart valves contain dermatan sulfate. Bone, cartilage, and the cornea of the eye contains keratan sulfate, Keratan, as opposed to keratin sulfate. Except for hyaluronic acid, the GAGs are associated with proteins to form large molecules called proteoglycans. Each proteoglycan consists of a core protein and GAGs that project from the protein like the bristles of a bottle brush. Also present in the ground substances are adhesion proteins, which are responsible for linking components of the ground substance to one another and to the surface of cells. The main adhesion protein of connective tissue is fibronectin, which binds to both collagen fibers, which will be discussed shortly, and ground substance, linking them together. It also attaches cells to the ground substance. The clinical connection. Chondroitin sulfate, glucosamine, and joint disease. In recent years, chondroitin sulfate and glucosamine, a proteoglycan, have been used as a nutritional supplement, either alone or in combination, to provide and maintain the structure and function of joint cartilage, to provide pain relief from osteoarthritis, and to reduce joint inflammation. Although these supplements have benefited some individuals with moderate to severe osteoarthritis, the benefit is minimal in lesser cases. More research is needed to determine how they act and why they help some people and not others. Fibers. 3 types of fibers are embedded in the extracellular matrix between the cells: collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. They function to strengthen and support connective tissue. Collagen fibers, colla, C-O-L-L-A, means glue. Collagen fibers are very strong and resist pulling forces, but they are not stiff. They allow tissue flexibility. The properties of different types of collagen fibers vary from tissue to tissue. For example, the collagen fibers found in cartilage attract more water molecules than those in bone, which give cartilage a more cushioning effect. Collagen fibers often occur in parallel bundles. The bundle arrangement adds great strength to the tissue. Chemically, collagen fibers consist of the protein collagen, which is the most abundant protein in the body, representing about 25% of the total. Collagen fibers are found in most types of connective tissue, especially bone, cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. Elastic fibers. Elastic fibers, which are smaller in diameter than collagen fibers, branch and join together to form a network within a tissue. An elastic fiber consists of molecules of protein, the protein elastin, surrounded by a glycoprotein named fibrillin, which adds strength and stability. Because of their unique molecular structure, elastic fibers are strong but can be stretched up to 150% of their relaxed length without breaking. Equally important, elastic fibers have the ability to return to their original shape after being stretched, a property called elasticity. Elastic fibers are plentiful in skin, blood vessel walls, and lung tissue. Reticular fibers. Reticular, meaning net. Reticular fibers consisting of collagen arranged in fine bundles with a coating of glycoprotein provide support in the walls of blood vessels and form a network around the cells in some tissue, such as areola connective tissue, adipose tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. Produced by fibroblasts, reticular fibers are much thinner than collagen fibers and form branching networks. Like collagen fibers, reticular fibers provide support and strength. Reticular fibers are plentiful in reticular connective tissue, which forms the stroma. Stroma meaning bed or covering. Reticular fibers are plentiful in reticular connective tissue, which forms the stroma or supporting framework of many soft organs, such as the spleen and lymph nodes. These fibers also help the basement membrane. They help to form the basement membrane. The clinical connection. Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome is an inherited disorder caused by defective fibrillin. Fibrillin, fibrillin gene. Marfan syndrome is an inherited disorder caused by a defective fibrillin gene. The result is abnormal development of elastic fibers. Tissue rich in elastic fibers are malformed or weakened. Structures affected most seriously are the covering layers of bones, periosteum, the ligaments that suspend the lens of the eye, in the wall of large arteries. People with Marfan syndrome tend to be tall and have disproportionately long arms, legs, fingers, and toes. A common symptom is blurred vision caused by displacement of the lens of the eye. The most life-threatening complication of Marfan syndrome is weakening of the aorta, the main artery that emerges from the heart, which can suddenly burst. Classification of connective tissue. Because of the diversity of cells and extracellular matrix and the differences in their relative proportions, the classification of connective tissue is not always clear-cut, and several classifications exist. We offer the following classification scheme. Number 1. Embryonic connective tissue. A. Mesenchyme. B. Mucous connective tissue. Number 2. Mature connective tissue. A. Loose connective tissue. A1. Areola connective tissue. A2. Adipose tissue. A3. Reticular connective tissue. B. Dense connective tissue. 1. Dense regular connective tissue. 2. Dense irregular connective tissue. And 3. Elastic connective tissue. C. Cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. Number 2. Fibrocartilage. Number 3. Elastic cartilage. D. Bone tissue. E. Liquid connective tissue. 1. Blood tissue. 2. Lymph. Note that the classification scheme has two major subclasses of connective tissue, embryonic and mature. Embryonic connective tissue is present primarily in the embryo, the developing human from fertilization through the first 2 months of pregnancy, and in the fetus, the developing human from the 3rd month of pregnancy to birth. One type of embryonic connective tissue one example of embryonic connective tissue found almost exclusively in the embryo is mesenchyme, the tissue from which almost all other connective tissue eventually rises. Mesenchyme is composed of irregularly shaped cells, a semi-fluid ground substance, and delicate reticular fibers. Another kind of embryonic tissue is mucous connective tissue, also known as Wharton's jelly, found mainly in the umbilical cord of the fetus. Mucous connective tissue is a form of mesenchyme that contains widely scattered fibroblasts, a more viscous jelly-like ground substance, and collagen fibers. The second major subclass of connective tissue, mature connective tissue, is present in the newborn. Its cells arise from mesenchyme. In the next section, we explore the numerous types of mature connective tissue. Types of mature connective tissue. The 5 types of mature connective tissue are 1. Connective tissue, 2. Dense connective tissue, 3. Cartilage, 4. Bone tissue, and 5. Liquid connective tissue, blood tissue, and lymph. We now examine each of them in detail. Loose connective tissue. The fibers of loose connective tissue are loosely arranged between cells. The types of loose connective tissue are areolar connective tissue, adipose tissue, and reticular connective tissue. Areolar connective tissue, one of the most widely distributed connective tissues in the body, is areolar connective tissue. It contains several types of cells, including fibroblasts, macrophages, plasma cell, mast cells, and adipocytes. All 3 types of fibers, collagen, elastic, and reticular, are arranged randomly throughout the tissue. The ground substance contains hyaluronic acid, chondroitin sulfate, dermatan sulfate, and keratin sulfate. Combined with adipose tissue, areolar connective tissue forms the subcutaneous layer, the layer of tissue that attaches the skin to the underlying tissue and organs. Adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is a loose connective tissue in which the cells, called adipocytes, adipo meaning fat, are specialized for storage of triglycerides, fats. Adipocytes are derived from fibroblasts. Because the cell fills up with a single large triglyceride droplet, the cytoplasm and nucleus are pushed to the periphery of the cell. Adipose tissue is found wherever areolar connective tissue is located. Adipose tissue is a good insulator and can therefore reduce heat loss through the skin. It is a major energy reserve and generally supports and protects various organs. As a person gains weight, the amount of adipose tissue increases and new blood vessels form. Thus, an obese person has many more blood vessels than does a lean person, a situation that can cause high blood pressure, since the heart has to work harder. Most adipose tissue in adults is white adipose tissue, the tissue just described. Another type called brown adipose tissue, or BAT, obtains its darker color from a very rich blood supply, along with numerous pigmented mitochondria that participate in aerobic cellular respiration. Although BAT is widespread in the fetus and infant, in adults only small amounts are present. BAT, or brown adipose tissue, generates considerable heat and probably helps to maintain body temperature in the newborn. The heat generated by many mitochondria is carried away to other body tissues by the extensive blood supply. The clinical connection. Liposuction. A surgical procedure called liposuction, lip equals fat, liposuction or suction lipectomy, ectomy meaning to cut out, involves suctioning small amounts of adipose tissue from various areas of the body. After an incision is made in the skin, the fat is removed through a hollow tube called a cannula, with the assistance of a powerful vacuum pressure unit that suctions out the fat. The technique can be used as a body contouring procedure in regions such as the thigh, buttocks, arms, breasts, and abdomen, and to transfer fat to another area of the body. Post-surgical complications that may develop include fat that may enter blood vessels, broken during the procedure and obstruct blood flow, infection, loss of feeling in the area, fluid depletion, injury to internal structures, and severe post-operative pain. Reticular connective tissue. Reticular connective tissue consists of fine interlacing reticular fibers and reticular cells. Reticular connective tissue forms the stroma, or the supporting framework, of the liver, spleen, and lymph nodes and helps bind together smooth muscle cells. Additionally, reticular fibers in the spleen filter blood and remove worn-out blood cells and reticular fibers in lymph nodes. which filter lymph and remove bacteria. Dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue contains more numerous, thicker, and denser fibers, packed more closely but considerably fewer cells than loose connective tissue. There are three types: dense, regular connective tissue, dense, irregular connective tissue, and elastic connective tissue. Dense, regular connective tissue contains bundles of collagen fibers that are regularly arranged in parallel patterns that provide the tissue with great strength. The tissue withstands pulling along the axis of the fibers. Fibroblasts, which produce the fibers, and ground substance appear in rows between the fibers. The tissue is silvery white and tough, yet somewhat pliable. Examples include tendons and most ligaments. Dense irregular connective tissue. Dense irregular connective tissue contains collagen fibers that are usually irregular. They are irregularly arranged, found in parts of the body when pulling forces are exerted in various directions. This tissue often occurs in sheets, such as in the dermis of the skin, which is deep to the epidermis, or the fibrous pericardium around the heart. Heart valves. The perichondrium, the tissue surrounding cartilage, and the periosteum, tissue surrounding bone, are dense irregular connective tissue, although they have a fairly orderly arrangement of collagen fibers. Elastic connective tissue. Branching elastic fibers predominate in elastic connective tissue. Once again, branching elastic fibers predominate in elastic connective tissue, giving the unstained tissue a yellowish color. Fibroblasts are present in the space between the fibers. Elastic connective tissue is quite strong and can recoil to its original shape after being stretched. Elasticity is important to the normal functioning of lung tissue, which recoils as you exhale, and elastic arteries, which recoil between heartbeats to maintain blood flow. Cartilage consists of a dense network of collagen fibers or elastic fibers firmly embedded in chondroitin sulfate, a gel-like component of the ground substance. Cartilage can endure considerably more stress than loose and dense connective tissue. The strength of cartilage is due to its collagen fibers and its resistance. No, that's incorrect. Let me repeat that. The strength of cartilage is due to its collagen fibers and its resilience, or its ability to assume its original shape after deformation. Once again, the strength of cartilage is due to its collagen fibers and its resilience. Is due to chondroitin sulfate. So the resilience of cartilage is due to chondroitin sulfate. The cells of mature cartilage, called chondrocytes, occur singly, S-I-N-G-L-Y. The cells of mature cartilage, called chondrocytes, occur singly or in groups within spaces called lacunae. Lacunae. Lacunae means little lakes. Singular is lacuna. The cells of mature cartilage, called chondrocytes, occur singly or in groups within space is called lacunae in the extracellular matrix. A covering of dense, irregular connective tissue called the perichondrium surrounds the surface of most cartilage. The perichondrium is composed of two layers, an outer fibrous layer that consists of collagen fibers, blood vessels, and fibroblasts, and an inner cellular layer that consists of cells involved in the growth of cartilage. Unlike other connective tissue, cartilage has no blood vessels or nerves except in the perichondrium. Cartilage does not have a blood supply because it secretes an anti-angiogenesis factor. Anti-angiogenesis factor, a substance that prevents blood vessel growth. Because of this property, anti-angiogenesis factor is being studied as a possible cancer treatment to stop cancer cells from promoting new blood vessel growth that supports their rapid rate of cell division and expansion. Since cartilage has no blood supply, it heals poorly following an injury. There are three types of cartilage: hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage contains a resilient gel and its ground substance and appears in the body as bluish-white, shiny substance. Repeat. Hyaline cartilage contains a resilient gel as its ground substance and appears in the body as a bluish-white, shiny substance. The thin, fine collagen fibers are not visible with ordinary staining techniques, and prominent chondrocytes are found. I have to repeat that. The fine collagen fibers are not visible with ordinary staining techniques, and prominent chondrocytes are found in lacunae. Most hyaline cartilage is surrounded by perichondrium. The exceptions are the articular cartilage in joints and the cartilage of the epiphyseal plates, the regions where bone lengthens as a person grows. Hyaline cartilage is the most abundant cartilage in the body. It provides flexibility and support, and at joints reduces friction and absorbs shock. Hyaline cartilage is the weakest of the three types of cartilage. Fibrocartilage. Chondrocytes are scattered among clearly visible thick bundles of collagen fibers within the extracellular matrix of fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage lacks a perichondrium. With a combination of strength and rigidity, this tissue is the strongest of the three types of cartilage. One location of fibrocartilage is the intervertebral discs, the discs between the vertebrae and the backbone. Elastic cartilage. The chondrocytes of elastic cartilage are located within a thread-like network of elastic fibers within the extracellular matrix. A perichondrium is present. Elastic cartilage provides strength and elasticity and maintains the shape of certain structures such as the external ear. Repair and growth of cartilage. Metabolically, cartilage is relatively inactive tissue that grows slowly. When injured or inflamed, cartilage repair proceeds slowly, in large part because cartilage is avascular. Substances needed for repair and blood cells that participate in tissue repair must diffuse or migrate into the cartilage. The growth of the cartilage follows two basic patterns: interstitial growth and appositional growth. In interstitial growth, there is growth from within the tissue. When cartilage grows by interstitial growth, the cartilage increases rapidly in size due to the division of existing chondrocytes and the continuous deposition of increasing amounts of extracellular matrix by chondrocytes. As the chondrocytes synthesize new matrix, they are pushed away from each other. These events cause the cartilage to expand from within, like bread rising, which is the reason for the term interstitial. This growth pattern occurs while the cartilage is young and pliable, during childhood and adolescence. In appositional growth, there is growth at the outer surface of the tissue. When cartilage grows by appositional growth, cells in the inner cellular layer of the perichondrium differentiate into chondroblasts. As differentiation continues, the chondroblasts surround themselves with extracellular matrix and become chondrocytes. As a result, matrix accumulates beneath the perichondrium on the outer surface of the cartilage, causing it to grow in width. Appositional growth starts later than interstitial growth and continues throughout adolescence. Bone tissue. Cartilage, joints, and bones make up the skeletal system. The skeletal system supports soft tissue, protects delicate structures, and works with skeletal muscles to generate movement. Bones store calcium and phosphorus, house red bone marrow, which produces blood cells, and contains yellow bone marrow, a storage site for triglycerides. Bones are organs composed of several different connective tissues, including bone or osseous tissue, the periosteum, red and yellow bone marrow, and the endosteum, a membrane that lines a space within the bone that stores yellow bone marrow. Bone tissue is classified as either compact or spongy, depending upon how its extracellular matrix and cells are organized. The basic unit of compact bone is an osteon, or Haversian system. Each osteon has 4 parts. The lamellae, lamellae, L-A-M-E-L-L-A-E, lamellae, meaning, lamellae means little plates, singular is lamella. They're concentric rings of extracellular matrix that consist of mineral salts, mostly calcium phosphates. Now, the lamellae are concentric rings of extracellular matrix that consist of mineral salts, which give bone its hardness, and collagen fibers, which give bone its strength. The lamellae are responsible for the compact nature of this type of bone tissue. Lacunae are small spaces between lamellae that contain mature bone cells called osteocytes. Projecting from the lacunae are caniculi, networks of minute canals containing the processes of osteocytes. Canaliculi provide roots for nutrients to reach osteocytes and for waste to leave them. Once again, projecting from the lacunae are canaliculi, networks of minute canals containing the processes of osteocytes. Canaliculi provide roots for nutrients to reach osteocytes and for waste to leave them. A central canal, or a Haversian canal, contains blood vessels and nerves. Spongy bone lacks osteons. Rather, it consists of columns of bone called trabeculae, which contain lamellae, osteocytes, lacunae, and canaliculi. Spaces between trabeculae are filled with red bone marrow. Chapter 6 presents bone tissue histology in more detail. The clinical connection. Tissue engineering. The technology of tissue engineering, which combines synthetic materials with cells, has allowed scientists to grow new tissues in the laboratory to replace damaged tissues in the body. Tissue engineers have already developed laboratory-grown versions of the skin and cartilage using scaffolding beds of biodegradable synthetic material or collagen as substrates that permit body cells to be cultured. As the cells divide and assemble, the scaffolding degrades. The new permanent tissue is then implanted in the patient. Other structures currently under development include bones, tendons, heart valves, bone marrow, and intestines. Work is also underway to develop insulin-producing cells for diabetics, dopamine-producing cell for Parkinson's disease patients, and even entire livers and kidneys. Liquid connective tissue. Blood tissue. Blood tissue, or simply blood, is a connective tissue with a liquid extracellular matrix called blood plasma. A pale yellow fluid that consists mostly of water with a wide variety of dissolved substances, nutrients, wastes, enzymes, plasma proteins, hormones, respiratory gases, and ions. Suspended in the blood plasma are formed elements: red blood cells, erythrocytes, white blood cells, leukocytes, and platelets, thrombocytes. Red blood cells transport oxygen to body cells and remove some carbon dioxide from them. White blood cells are involved in phagocytosis, immunity, and allergic reaction. Platelets participate in blood clotting. The details of blood are considered in Chapter 19. Lymph. Lymph is the extracellular fluid that flows in lymphatic vessels. It is connective tissue that consists of several types of cells and a clear liquid extracellular matrix that is similar to blood plasma, but with much less protein. The composition of lymph varies from one part of the body to another. For example, lymph-leaving lymph nodes includes many lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell, in contrast to lymph from the small intestines, which has a high content of newly absorbed dietary lipids. The details of lymph are considered in Chapter 22. Membranes. The object of this section is to define a membrane and to describe the classification of membranes. Membranes are flat sheets of pliable tissue that cover or line a part of the body. The combination of an epithelial layer and an underlying connective tissue layer constitutes an epithelial membrane. Membranes are flat sheets of pliable tissue that cover or line a part of the body. The combination of an epithelial layer and an underlying connective tissue layer constitutes an epithelial membrane. The principal epithelial membranes of the body are mucous membranes, serous membranes, and the cutaneous membrane or skin. Another type of membrane, a synovial membrane, lines joints and contains connective tissue but no epithelium. Epithelial membranes. Mucous membranes. A mucous membrane or mucosa lines a body cavity that opens directly to the exterior. Mucous membranes line the entire digestive, respiratory, and reproductive tracts and much of the urinary tract. They consist of a lining layer of epithelium and an underlying layer of connective tissue. The epithelial layer of a mucous membrane is an important feature of the body's defense mechanism because it is a barrier that microbes and other pathogens have difficulty penetrating. Usually, tight junctions connect the cells so material cannot leak in between them. Goblet cells and other cells of the epithelial layer of a mucous membrane secrete mucus, and this slippery fluid prevents the cavity from drying out. It also traps particles in the respiratory passageway and lubricates food as it moves through the gastrointestinal tract. In addition, the epithelial layer secretes some of the enzymes needed for digestion and is the site of food and fluid absorption in the gastrointestinal tract. The epithelia of mucous membranes vary greatly in different parts of the body. For example, the mucous membrane of the small intestines is non-ciliated, simple columnar epithelium, and the large airways of the lungs consist of pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. The connective tissue layer of mucous membrane is areolar connective tissue and is called lamina propria. Propria meaning one's own, so named because it belongs to the mucous membrane. The lamina propria supports the epithelium, binds it to the underlying structures, and allows some flexibility of the membrane. It also holds blood vessels in place and affords some protection for underlying structures. Oxygen and nutrients diffuse from the lamina propria to the epithelium covering it. Carbon dioxide and waste diffuse in the opposite direction. Serous membrane. Serous meaning watery. Serous membrane or serosa lines the body cavity, thoracic and abdominal. that does not open directly to the exterior, and it covers the organs that lie within the cavity. Serous membranes consist of areolar connective tissue covered by mesothelium, simple squamous epithelium. Serous membranes have two layers. The layer attached to and lining the cavity wall is called the parietal layer. Parietal, from the word pariet, meaning wall. The layer that covers and adheres to the organs within the cavity is the visceral layer. Viscera, meaning body organ. The mesothelium of a serous membrane secretes serous fluid, a watery lubricant that allows organs to glide easily over one another or to slide against the walls of cavities. The serous membrane lining the thoracic cavity and covering the lungs is the pleura. The serous membrane lining the heart cavity and covering the heart is the pericardium. The serous membrane lining the abdominal cavity and covering the abdominal organs is the peritoneum. Cutaneous membrane. The cutaneous membrane, or skin, covers the entire surface of the body and consists of superficial portions called the epidermis and a deeper portion called the dermis. The epidermis consists of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, which protects underlying tissues. The dermis consists of connective tissue, areolar connective tissue, and dense irregular connective tissue. Details of the cutaneous membrane are presented in Chapter 5. Synovial membrane. Synovial membranes. Synovial from the word syn, S-Y-N, meaning together, referring here to a place where the bones come together, and ova, meaning egg, because it resembles the slimy egg white of an uncooked egg. Synovial membranes line the cavities of freely movable joints. Like serous membranes, synovial membranes line structures that do not open to the exterior. Unlike mucous, serous, and cutaneous membranes, they lack an epithelium and are therefore not epithelial membranes. Synovial membranes are composed of a discontinuous layer of cells called synovicytes or synovicytes, which are closer to the synovial cavity, the space between the bones, and a layer of connective tissue, areola and adipose, deep to the synoviocyte. Once again, synovial membranes are composed of a discontinuous layer of cells called synoviocytes, which are closer to the synovial cavity, and a layer of connective tissue deep to the synovicyte. Synoviocytes secrete some of the components of synovial fluid. Synovial fluid lubricates and nourishes the cartilage covering the bone at movable joints and contains macrophages that remove microbes and debris from the joint cavity. Muscular tissue. The objective of this section is to describe the general features of muscular tissue, to contrast the structure, location, and mode of control of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle tissue. Muscular tissue consists of elongated cells called muscle fibers or myocytes that can use ATP to generate force. As a result, muscular tissue produces body movement, maintains posture, and generates heat. It also provides protection. Based on its location and certain structural and functional features, muscular tissue is classified into three types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle tissue is named for its location. It is usually attached to the bones of the skeleton. Another feature is its striations, alternating light and dark bands within the fibers that are visible under a light microscope. Skeletal muscle is considered voluntary muscle because it can be made to contract or relax by conscious control. Skeletal muscle fibers can vary in length from a few centimeters in short muscles up to 30 to 40 centimeters in your longest muscle. A muscle fiber is roughly cylindrical in shape and has many nuclei located at the periphery. Within a whole muscle, the individual muscle fibers may be parallel to one another. Cardiac muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle tissue forms most of the wall of the heart. Like skeletal muscle, it is striated. However, unlike skeletal muscle tissue, it is involuntary. Its contraction is not consciously controlled. Again, cardiac muscle tissue forms most of the wall of the heart. Like skeletal muscle, it is striated. However, unlike skeletal muscle tissue, it is involuntary. Its contraction is not consciously controlled. Cardiac muscle fibers are branched and usually have one centrally located nuclei. An occasional cell has two nuclei. They attach end to end by transverse thickenings of the plasma membrane called intercalated discs, which contain both desmosomes and gap junctions. Intercalated discs are unique to cardiac muscle tissue. The desmosomes strengthen the tissue and hold the fibers together during their rigorous contractions. The gap junctions provide a route for quick conduction of muscle action potentials throughout the heart. Smooth muscle tissue is located in the walls of hollow internal structures such as blood vessels, airways to the lungs, the stomach, intestines, gallbladder, and urinary bladder. Its contraction helps constrict or narrow the lumen of blood vessels, physically break down and move food along the gastrointestinal tract, move fluids to the body, and eliminate waste. Smooth muscle fibers are usually involuntary and they are non-striated. They lack striations, hence the term smooth. The smooth muscle fiber is small, thickest in the middle, and tapering at each end. It contains a single centrally located nucleus. Gap junctions connect many individual fibers in some smooth muscle tissue, for example, in the wall of the intestines. Such muscle tissue can produce powerful contractions as many muscle fibers contract in unison. In other locations, such as the iris of the eye, smooth muscle fibers contract individually, like skeletal muscle fibers, because gap junctions are absent. Chapter 10 provides a more detailed discussion of muscular tissue. Nervous tissue. The objective of this section is to describe the structural features and functions of nervous tissue. Despite the awesome complexity of the nervous system, it consists of only two principal types of cells, neurons and neuroglia. Neurons, or nerve cells, are sensitive to various stimuli. They convert stimuli into electrical signals called action potentials, which are nerve impulses, and they conduct these action potentials to other neurons, to muscular tissue, or to glands. Again, they convert stimuli into electrical signals called action potentials and conduct these action potentials to other neurons, to muscular tissue, or to glands. Many neurons consist of three basic parts: a cell body and two kinds of cell processes, dendrites and axons. The cell body contains the nucleus and other organelle. Dendrites are tapering, highly branched, and usually short cell processes. They are the major receiving or inputting portion of the neuron. The axon, or a neuron, is a single, thin, cylindrical process that may be very long. It is the output portion of the neuron, conducting nerve impulses towards another neuron or towards some other tissue. Even though neuroglia do not generate or conduct nerve impulses, these cells do have many important supportive functions. The detailed structure and function of neurons and neuroglia are considered in Chapter 12. Excitable cells. Neurons and muscle fibers. The objective is to explain the concept of electrical excitability. Excitable cells. Neurons and muscle fibers are considered excitable cells because they exhibit electrical excitability, the ability to respond to certain stimuli by producing electrical signals such as action potentials. Action potentials can propagate, travel along the plasma membrane of a neuron or muscle fiber due to the presence of specific voltage-gated ion channels. When an action potential forms in a neuron, the neuron releases chemicals called neurotransmitters, which allow neurons to communicate with other neurons, muscle fibers, or glands. When an action potential occurs in a muscle fiber, the muscle fiber contracts, resulting in activities such as the movement of the limb, the propulsion of food through the small intestines, and the movement of blood out of the heart and into blood vessels of the body. The muscle action potential and the nerve action potential are discussed in detail in chapters 10 and 12, respectively. Tissue repair, restoring homeostasis. In this section, the objective is to describe the role of tissue repair in restoring homeostasis. Tissue repair is the replacement of worn-out, damaged, or dead cells. New cells originate by cell division from the stroma, the supporting connective tissue, or from the parenchyma cells that constitute the functioning part of the tissue or organ. In adults, each of the four basic tissue types, epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous, has a different capacity for replenishing parenchymal cells lost by damage, disease, or other processes. Epithelial cells, which endure considerable wear and tear, and even injury, in some locations, have continuous capacity for renewal. In some cases, immature, undifferentiated cells called stem cells divide to replace lost or damaged cells. For example, stem cells reside in protected